Have you ever felt controlled by impulses you can't quite explain? As if something inside you is making decisions without asking for permission? Carl Jung dedicated his life to exploring these hidden parts of the mind, believing that there is much more to our psyche than what we consciously perceive. He introduced the concept of archetypes, invisible patterns that shape our actions, emotions, and even our dreams. These archetypes live in the unconscious, a deep layer that carries memories and symbols shared by all of us, crossing cultures and generations. By bringing these aspects to light, Jung invites us to make conscious what remains in the shadows of the mind. After all, to him, true freedom and self-understanding come when we can see and integrate these elements. But how do we understand what isn't visible? How do we decipher the language of the unconscious? This is an invitation to explore Jung's ideas about archetypes and discover how these invisible forces influence us, even when we think we're in control. Because, deep down, knowing these parts of ourselves is the first step to living more consciously and fully. Carl Jung dedicated his life to exploring the mysteries of the human mind, a quest that went far beyond the walls of his office or the pages of his books. For him, understanding the psyche wasn't just an intellectual curiosity, but a deep-seated need to understand himself, and, through that, help others do the same. Jung saw the human mind as a vast territory, full of unknown aspects that needed to be uncovered so that we could find balance and purpose. And this exploration required courage to face the most complex and hidden corners of our psyche. Introspection, for Jung, was a powerful tool to reveal these unknown parts. He compared it to a deep dive, where each descent brings to the surface new layers of thoughts, emotions, and memories that shape who we are. Often, our behaviors and reactions seem puzzling, even to us, as if they're driven by forces we can't fully understand. Jung's perspective suggests that these answers lie in deeper layers, and accessing them is the way to untie these inner knots and transform our self-perception. What makes Jung's approach so captivating is that he didn't limit himself to theory. He embarked on this journey of self-exploration himself. His own doubts, conflicts, and revelations shaped his understanding of the human psyche. He believed that true clarity only emerges when we are willing to confront our fears and face what we often prefer to hide. This brave look inward is, for him, the starting point for living more authentically, embracing both our virtues and our imperfections. And it is this movement of self-discovery that he saw as essential to a full and meaningful life. Jung described the human mind as a dynamic system, where the conscious and the unconscious are in constant interaction, like two currents meeting and blending together. The conscious represents everything we are aware of, our choices, thoughts, and daily perceptions. Meanwhile, the unconscious is a vast reservoir of experiences, memories, and impulses that, though not directly perceived, deeply influence who we are and how we act. The relationship between these two aspects of the psyche is fluid, and trying to understand this dynamic is like learning to navigate an ocean that constantly changes direction. When we allow ourselves to acknowledge this constant exchange, we realize that the unconscious is not a chaotic force to be feared, but an essential part of who we are. It holds memories, traumas, and desires that, even when hidden, subtly shape our actions. Ignoring this presence is like trying to row against the tide, while learning to accept and understand these currents can give us more clarity about our own motivations. Jung compared this process to a form of navigation. Just as a skilled sailor learns to use the sea currents to their advantage, we can learn to interpret and utilize the influences of the unconscious, navigating more safely and consciously through the sea of our mind. For Jung, understanding this dynamic was essential to achieving a state of inner balance. Instead of trying to control or suppress unconscious impulses, he believed that the best path was to learn to decipher them and integrate them into the conscious. This way, the psyche would become more cohesive and harmonious, enabling a more authentic life. This continuous interaction between what we know and what we don't perceive creates a kind of internal dialogue, where each discovery, no matter how small, can help us better understand our own complexity. Jung introduced a concept that expanded our view of the psyche beyond the individual, the collective unconscious. Imagine a vast library that doesn't belong to anyone in particular but is accessible to everyone. This library holds memories, symbols, and universal patterns that transcend cultures and generations, connecting people from different times and places. For Jung, the collective unconscious was this shared psychological heritage, a repository of experiences that we all carry, even without being aware of it. He believed that, just as we inherit physical traits, we also inherit these symbolic patterns, which we call archetypes. These archetypes are universal figures that appear in myths, stories, and even in people's dreams, regardless of their cultural backgrounds. Think of the figure of the hero who faces challenges and overcomes obstacles. It appears in both Greek epics and modern superhero tales. Similarly, archetypes like the protective mother, the wise mentor, or the adventurous explorer are found in stories around the world. This constant presence suggests that, on some deep level, we all share a common foundation of experiences and meanings, as if there is a universal narrative that crosses time and space. Understanding the collective unconscious is like looking into a mirror that reflects not only our personal history but also the history of humanity. It reveals that certain themes, fears, and desires are not just individual, but part of something greater, something that transcends ourself. When we recognize these patterns, we can see that some of the issues we face are not just our own, but echoes of a long history of human experiences. For Jung, exploring this collective heritage is essential to understanding why certain images and stories have such a profound impact on our lives, and how they can guide us in moments of doubt or conflict, offering a perspective that goes beyond the immediate present. Jung described archetypes as inherited psychological patterns that deeply influence how we think, feel, and behave. They are like molds that shape our experiences, regardless of our culture or personal history. These archetypes appear in various forms: the hero, the mother, the mentor, the child, among many others. They are figures we instantly recognize, not because we have learned them consciously, but because they are part of a psychological structure we all share. And while they may seem like mere characters from stories, their influence goes far beyond that. Archetypes manifest in the myths and legends of all cultures, but they are also present in our daily lives and in the dreams we have at night. The hero who faces their fears, the maternal figure who nurtures and protects, the wise one who guides. These are all archetypes that we see repeatedly in ancient and contemporary stories, from Homer's Greek epics to modern superhero sagas. They symbolize universal aspects of the human experience, serving as guides that help us understand our own challenges and dilemmas. That's why stories that carry these archetypes resonate so deeply with us. They speak a language we recognize on a profound and emotional level. For Jung, these archetypes were not just symbolic figures, but also parts of our psyche that needed to be understood and integrated. When we encounter situations that evoke these patterns, such as taking on a leadership role or caring for someone in need, we are, in a sense, activating these archetypes in our own lives. Understanding this dynamic can help us see why we behave in certain ways, especially in times of crisis or change. After all, these invisible patterns that shape our lives are not just old stories. They are living parts of who we are, connecting us to something greater than our individual experience. Jung saw dreams and symbols as a rich and complex form of communication, more than just simple manifestations of the unconscious. He believed that dreams were messages that the unconscious sends to the conscious, using a symbolic language that, if understood, can reveal deep and hidden aspects of our psyche. These symbols are like codes that bring to light desires, fears, and potentials that we do not directly perceive in our everyday lives. It's as if the unconscious is constantly trying to show us something important, but uses a language we need to learn how to decode. Imagine dreaming of a house in ruins. This image could symbolize parts of ourselves that are neglected, aspects of our personality that need attention or transformation. And it's not just in dreams. Symbols are present in art, literature, and even in nature itself. They act as gateways to the collective unconscious, connecting us to a shared psychological heritage, and helping us understand experiences that go beyond what we can express in words. Deciphering this symbolic language is like learning to read a map that guides us inward. By paying attention to the symbols that appear in our dreams and in our lives, we can begin to integrate parts of our psyche that would otherwise remain unexplored. This can lead to a profound transformation, where fears and anxieties become understandable and repressed. Desires find a way to manifest in a healthy manner. Jung believed that by learning to interpret this language, we can reconnect with an essential part of who we are, discovering new ways to grow and develop. Jung used the term shadow to describe the hidden and repressed aspects of our personality, everything we prefer not to see or deem unacceptable. These are emotions, desires, and traits we judge as inappropriate or undesirable, which we try to hide not only from others but also from ourselves. However, instead of disappearing, these elements remain in the unconscious, subtly influencing our thoughts and behaviors, sometimes in destructive ways. Confronting this shadow is one of the most challenging, yet transformative, steps towards self-awareness. When we avoid confronting our shadow, it tends to manifest in other ways, whether through impulses we can't control, self-sabotaging behaviors, or even projections, where we attribute to others what we don't accept in ourselves. Integrating the shadow, rather than repressing it, is like turning on a light in a dark room. At first, it may be uncomfortable and even frightening, but it's necessary to see what is there and to understand why we behave in certain ways. This integration does not mean giving in to impulses or blindly accepting these darker aspects, but rather understanding them and using them constructively. So, instead of fighting against anger, insecurity, or fear, we learn to handle these emotions in a more balanced and conscious way. For Jung, true self-awareness is only possible when we accept all parts of ourselves, both the light and the shadows. It is in this balance that we can find a more authentic and fulfilling life, where we are not controlled by what we repress but guided by a deeper understanding of who we truly are. Jung warned of the risks of ignoring or disconnecting from the unconscious. When we are not aware of the deeper aspects of our psyche, we run the risk of being guided by impulses and patterns we do not understand. It's as if we're being swept away by invisible currents, without realizing what is really happening. This disconnection can lead to destructive behaviors, feelings of emptiness, or a profound sense of disorientation, where choices seem purposeless and emotions become confused and uncontrollable. Modern life only intensifies this challenge. We live in a world that constantly distracts and overwhelms us with information, pulling us further away from the silence needed to connect with our own minds. Social media, relentless work, constant entertainment, all these can keep us busy but also distance us from what we truly need to face internally. By ignoring these aspects of the unconscious, we risk living a life that seems full on the surface but hides a deep emptiness. Jung suggested that to find balance and well-being, it is essential to make this reconnection, learning to listen to and understand the parts of ourselves we often try to ignore or silence. Jung believed that, to reconnect with the unconscious, we needed to create spaces in our lives that allowed for the expression of these deeper aspects of the psyche. He suggested that practices such as meditation, art, writing, and even contemplation of nature could serve as bridges to access and integrate these elements. These activities help calm the conscious mind and open a path for the unconscious to manifest more clearly, enabling us to explore our emotions, desires, and internal patterns without the judgment and rush that often dominate our daily lives. For example, meditation and mindfulness practices invite us to be present and observe our thoughts without trying to control them. It's like creating a pause in the mental whirlwind, allowing subtle aspects of our mind to surface. Similarly, art, whether drawing, painting, writing, or playing music, allows us to express feelings and ideas that we might not be able to put into words. These forms of expression are ways of bringing the symbols of the unconscious to life, helping us to integrate and understand them more deeply. Jung emphasized that by engaging in these practices, people could begin to transform their internal patterns, facilitating a continuous process of self-awareness and balance.